The coffee that morning smelled like death wearing perfume. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment my son's heart stopped and my revenge began. If you're watching this, don't scroll. Listen, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just a story. It's a confession, carved out of grief, guilt, and the kind of love that keeps you awake at 3 a.m. My name's Raymond Hartley, 60 years old, ex-shipyard mechanic, father, widower, and the man who switched the wrong cup of coffee. If you've ever trusted someone who smiled while slowly breaking you down, this one's for you. Before we go any further, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you first heard about my story of revenge. I want to know how far the truth has traveled, and whether it's reached the people who still think they got away with it. Now let's go back to that morning in Milwaukee. The steam, the smell of fake caramel, and the first time I realized my family was poisoned, long before the coffee ever touched our lips. The smell hit me first sweet wrong, like burnt sugar, poured over metal. I'd smelled something like it once years ago, when a battery acid leak mixed with oil in the shipyard and singed my nose for a week. That morning, the same scent came rising out of my coffee cup. Brooke smiled like she always does when she's lying. Made you your favorite Ray. Black, extra strong. Her voice had that bright Sunday morning sweetness that never matched the look in her eyes. She set the tray down, 3 cups, steam curling like thin ghosts. 1 for me, 1 for my son Daniel, and 1 for herself. I leaned in. That ain't our coffee. She laughed, tucking a strand of her perfect blonde hair behind her ear. Relax, it's stevia caramel. Healthier. No sugar, no guilt. They had it on sale. Stevia caramel. Jesus Christ. Who ruins black coffee with that? Daniel looked like hell, pale, trembling a bit. He hadn't shaved in days. My boy used to be solid, full of jokes, always the first to help me in the garage. Now he could barely lift his mug. Brooke said he was dealing with stress, that the panic attacks were just from work. I'd believed that for a while. Not anymore. Daniel rubbed his chest again. Brooke, maybe I should, Dan. She cut in, smiling. You're fine. It's just caffeine. Don't freak yourself out again. He sighed, nodded weakly, and stood. Gonna hit the bathroom. The moment his footsteps faded down the hall, the whole house went silent, just the ticking of the wall clock behind me, steady as a metronome. I'd spent half my life listening to the rhythm of engines, learning how to tell when something was about to break. That same instinct kicked in now. Tick, tick, tick. I looked down. There was foam on 1 cup, just a thin, uneven ring of tiny bubbles clinging to the surface. Not mine, not Brooke's, Daniel's. Brooke's hand twitched toward it, like she wanted to move it away, but she caught herself and smiled instead. Something wrong, Ray? Yeah, I said, my voice low. Everything. I slid my cup toward Daniel's and switched them slow, steady, just like swapping 2 wrenches on a hot pipe. She saw it, of course. Her smile tightened, but she didn't say a word. Daniel came back, drying his hands on a paper towel. Man, I'm beat. He grabbed the cup, my cup now, and took a long sip. 3 seconds later, the paper towel slipped from his hand. 5 seconds later, his eyes rolled back. By the 10th second, he hit the floor so hard the mug shattered against the tile. Daniel, Brooke screamed, rushing to him. Her voice broke high, but her feet moved the wrong way toward the table. She reached for the tray for the cups. I caught her wrist midair. Her skin was cold. Don't touch a damn thing, I said. Ray, not a thing. My heart was hammering, but my head was clear. I grabbed my phone thumb, shaking only once, before the muscle memory of years fixing heavy steel took over. Record. Pan the scene. 3 cups, 1 tray. Clock on the wall showing 9 to 12 a.m. Then I pulled out 3 Ziploc bags from the drawer, the kind I used for spare bolts and washers. I sealed each cup inside one, labeling them with a Sharpie Raymond. Left Brooke, center Daniel. Right swapped. The smell hit me again, sharp and unmistakable now. Bitter almond. Cyanide. My God. 911, what's your emergency? My son collapsed, I said, forcing my voice calm. Possible poisoning. Sweet almond odor in the coffee. 3 cups on the table. Nobody touches them. Address, I gave it word for word. Send an ambulance and police. Brooke knelt beside Daniel, crying loud but with no tears. Her hands hovered over him. Then she looked up at me, eyes wide, mascara smudged just enough to look rehearsed. Ray, please, he's not breathing right. You have to help him. I am helping, I said, by keeping those cups where they are. For a few long minutes, all I could hear was Daniel's ragged breaths, the ticking clock, and the distant wail of the approaching siren. Then the first flash of red light swept through the kitchen window. Brooke stood up slowly, brushing her hands on her jeans. Her sobs stopped. She looked straight at me, her voice almost a whisper, low and clean, like the edge of a knife. You mixed up those cups, Ray, she said. That's on you. The words froze me harder than the cold floor ever could. The sirens screamed closer. And I realized this wasn't just about what was in the coffee. It was about who was about to rewrite the truth. The bright light of the ER burned through my skull like a welder's torch. Monitors beeped, nurses moved quick, but quiet. Daniel lay on a gurney, skin gray, breathing shallow IV line in his arm. I stood in the corner, hands clenched, the plastic evidence bags still in my jacket pocket. The smell of disinfectant, mixed with that faint sweet almond ghost that hadn't left my nose since the kitchen. Mr. Hartley. The woman in the white coat had a voice that carried command without volume. I'm Dr. Lila Nguyen, toxicology attending. You're the father. I nodded. Raymond. Yeah. She glanced at the chart, then back at Daniel. Your son's showing classic signs of cyanide exposure. Rapid onset, short breath, confused effusion, low blood pressure. You mentioned an almond smell. Yes, I said. And I saved the cups, sealed them. I pulled out the zip bags from my jacket. Her brows went up, surprised but impressed. That's remarkably thorough, Mr. Hartley. She motioned to a nurse. We'll need those for forensic testing. Chain of custody applies, so we'll log everything. May I? I nodded. She opened a sterile container, slipped the zip bags inside, labeled them with printed tags. Blood, urine, gastric content draw. Now, she ordered, and 2 nurses moved in. Then she turned to me again. We're notifying the Milwaukee PD. This can't wait. The door opened a few minutes later. A detective stepped in, mid-40s, hair in a tight bun, leather jacket still damp from the rain. Detective Rosa Morales, AMT, Major Crimes. She showed her badge but didn't flash it like a showpiece. Her eyes were calm, dark, sharp. I understand you believe there was tampering, she said, pulling out a notebook. I don't believe, I said. I know. I told her everything. The caramel smell, the foam, the cup switch. Daniel collapsing, Brooke, trying to wash the cups. My call to 911, my video. I played her the 30-second clip. Timestamp it steady. The cups exactly where they'd been. Morales nodded slowly. You did right, Mr. Hartley. That video will be crucial. Now about these evidence bags. Dr. Nguyen lifted the container. They are logged under hospital forensic intake. 2 nurses witnessed the sealing. We can co-sign your receipt if needed. Good, Morales said, jotting it down. We'll transfer chain of custody to MPD once I file the paperwork. She turned to the nurses. Names and signatures, please. They signed the intake log right there. Brooke was sitting on a plastic chair near the hall, head in her hands. The moment Morales turned her way, she looked up, eyes red, voice trembling. Detective, please, my husband just collapsed. I don't even know what's happening. We're figuring that out, Morales said evenly. Mr. Hartley says there were 3 cups of coffee. Can you tell me who made them? I did, Brooke said. Every morning. It's just coffee. Daniel likes it sweeter lately, so I added stevia caramel. That's all. Did you add anything else? Brooke blinked fast. No, God, no. He's been under a lot of stress, and Ray. She turned to me with a small, pitiful smile. He forgets things sometimes. Last week he left the garage door open all night. Once he misplaced the car keys and thought I moved them. I clenched my jaw. She'd moved them. I'd found them later in the spice drawer. Morales caught the flicker on my face, but didn't comment. We'll sort out the details, she said quietly. For now, Mr. Hartley, can you keep your house exactly as it was? We'll need a warrant before we search, but don't touch anything. Understand? I understand, I said. I'll make sure nothing's moved. She nodded once. I'll be in touch tonight. Stay reachable. By the time I left Frodtert Hospital, the sun was low gold bleeding into gray. The drive home felt like 100 miles of silence. When I unlocked the door, the house felt wrong. Too still. Too clean. The smell of coffee had gone flat, but under it, that same fake caramel lingered, clinging to the air like a lie. I turned on the kitchen light. Everything was where we'd left it, except now every corner looked suspicious. The tray, the counter, the spice rack. I pulled open the cabinet and slipped on my old nitrile gloves, the ones I used for oil changes back when my hands were still worth something. One by one, I pulled out the jars. Paprika, cinnamon, stevia caramel. That last one stopped me cold. The label looked brand new, printed glossy. Brooke always bought in bulk, but this was a single 8-ounce jar, spotless. I twisted it open. The scent hit me like a punch-sharp chemical sweet in the worst way. Jesus, I muttered, sealing it again. Then I saw it shoved behind the spice rack, a small box of insulin syringes. Loose. A few missing. Alcohol swabs beside them. And a small brown notebook, meal and dose, written in perfect cursive. I opened it with 2 fingers. Inside columns, date, meal, dose, initials. Under initials were 3 letters that made my stomach twist. D. Daniel. R. Ray. G. Guest. She'd been tracking us. Every coffee, every snack, every visit. The pages were neat, the numbers precise. I took out my phone and started photographing each page, time-stamping the shots. Then I placed the jar, syringes, swabs, and notebook into a large plastic storage bin I kept for tools. On top I laid a sheet of paper, kitchen evidence. 6:47 p.m. I sealed the lid with duct tape, and C signed across the seam, my nom crossing both sides, so it couldn't be reopened without showing it. When I was done, I just stood there. The house hummed with the fridge, nothing else. The clock ticked again, same rhythm as the morning. Only now every sound felt like proof. Then came a knock. 3 soft taps. Hesitant. I opened the door. Mrs. O'Connor stood there, clutching her cardigan tight, her face pale as flour. She lived 2 houses down, 82, sharp as a nail, even if her hands shook. Ray, she whispered. I just saw the ambulance earlier. Is Daniel okay? He's alive, I said. They think it's poison. Her eyes widened. Poison? She took a deep breath, then swallowed hard. Ray, I need to tell you something. Last week, Brooke brought me a little pudding cup, said it was caramel homemade. I only ate half before I started feeling dizzy. Thought it was my sugar dropping, but it didn't feel right. My heart raced, and then her hand trembled as she touched her chest. I fainted. My daughter found me on the floor. I didn't even tell the doctor because I felt fine later. I stared at her, pulse climbing. You sure it was the same caramel? She called it. The same thing Mrs. O'Connor said. Stevia caramel. from a new recipe. I didn't want to think bad things, but after what happened to Daniel, her voice cracked. Then she looked down at her hand as if remembering something. Ray, I still have the spoon. I never washed it. It fell behind my dish rack. She held out a small plastic bag. Inside a silver spoon, faint smudge near the bowl. My mouth went dry. You kept this. I don't know why, she said. Something told me to. I took the bag carefully, gloves still on. You just did the smartest thing anyone's done today, Mrs. O'Connor. Because now I wasn't just a crazy old man chasing smells. Now I had proof. The morning air outside Milwaukee Police District 3 was sharp enough to bite. I carried the plastic storage bin against my chest like it was something alive. Inside, taped, signed, time-stamped, was everything that could either damn or save me. Detective Morales met me at the front steps. No makeup, coffee in hand badge at her belt. Morning, Mr. Hartley. You brought the box. Didn't sleep much, I said. Just made sure the seal was still tight. Let's get it logged properly, she said, leading me inside. At the property desk, a young officer scanned the barcode stickers, photographed each angle, and typed out the intake report. Evidence container, plastic storage bin sealed with duct tape, bearing signature R. Hartley. Contents listed on supplemental sheet. He handed me the property receipt, case number, timestamp 0714:23 a.m. Morales and I both signed. 2 witnesses, a clerk, and Sergeant Grant co-signed as evidence custodians. Chain of custody starts here, Morales said quietly. Nothing leaves that vault without paperwork. I nodded. Good. A man in a navy suit entered the evidence room, mid-30s, trim beard, sharp eyes that didn't blink much. Assistant District Attorney, Patrick Klein, he said, offering a hand. I've read the initial report. Morales filled me in. If the talk screen confirms cyanide, we're moving this straight to a grand jury. No delays. He flipped through the intake photos, tapping one. That notebook, meal and dose, looks like intent to administer, not accident. Brooke tracked everything I said. Every cup of coffee, every meal. Klein exhaled through his nose. We'll treat this as premeditated poisoning until proven otherwise. Morales was already typing an affidavit on her laptop. She read aloud as she wrote, voice steady, affiant. Detective Rosa Morales, MPD, Major Crimes Division, attests to the following probable cause. On November 1st, Daniel Hartley collapsed after consuming coffee, prepared by Brooke Hartley. A distinct almond odor consistent with cyanide was noted by witness Raymond Hartley. Witness also observed attempted destruction of potential evidence by Brooke Hartley, specifically, removal of coffee cups. Secondary witness. Mrs. Margaret O'Connor reports similar syncopal episode after consuming dessert from same suspect 1 week prior. She looked at Klein. That enough for a warrant? He nodded. More than enough. Within an hour, a courier brought the signed document back from the courthouse, search warrant, number 225-311, authorized by Judge A. Whitaker. Morales folded the copy neatly into her jacket. Let's go make it official. The search began at 9:32 a.m. My house, my kitchen filled with people in latex gloves and camera rigs. I stood aside, hands in my pockets, trying not to think about how foreign my own home looked, with blue tape stretched across doorways. Forensic techs cataloged everything with surgical calm. Item 1, a photographer called out. Plastic jar labeled stevia caramel, residue at rim. Item 2, another voice. Stainless syrup pump half full, sealed in evidence bag. Item 3, insulin syringes assorted 5 missing. Item 4, notebook labeled meal and dose. Item 5, folder labeled life insurance, R. Hartley. Beneficiary listed as Brooke Hartley. Item 6, draft will Daniel Hartley. Named incapacitated, assets transferred to spouse Brooke Hartley. Item 7, bank receipts. cash withdrawals, consistent pattern every Friday from Daniel Hartley's account. Each word was a hammer, hitting the inside of my chest. Klein stood by the counter, flipping the insurance folder open with gloved fingers. Date of issue 2 months ago. Premium prepaid for a full year. He shot me a look that was part pity, part fury. She was planning your funeral, Mr. Hartley. Morales photographed the last page of the will. Clause 3. In the event of cognitive decline or incapacity of Raymond Hartley, executor rights transfer fully to Brooke Hartley. She muttered, Christ, she even picked the language of mercy. Meanwhile, the digital forensics team worked in the living room. They'd seized Brooke's phone from the hospital waiting area that morning under emergency consent. One tech, a kid who couldn't be more than 25, called out, Detective, you need to see this. On the laptop screen glowed a folder labeled Caramel Recipes. Inside were dozens of photos, cups, spoons, small bottles of syrup. Every single file had EXIF timestamps. Cross-check with the hospital logs, Morales said. The tech typed fast. Here, Daniel's first ER visit 6 weeks ago, timestamp on this photo. Matches exactly. Then here another set 1 week later. Same hour of day. She even made notes. He opened a text file that read, 110 dilution. Evenings hit faster. Reduced dose if pale. Sweet smell hides it. Morales whispered, Jesus, Jesus, and pressed her lips together until they went white. Klein stared at the screen. That's not a recipe. That's lab notes. The tech nodded. EXIF data confirms these weren't downloaded. Original captures, same device. Morales closed her notebook slowly. We've got premeditation, motive, and method. All we need is confirmation from Tux. As if summoned by the thought, her phone buzzed. Caller ID, Dr. Leila Nguyen, Freud Tert Toxicology. She answered on speaker. Nguyen, you're on with Morales and A88 Klein. Dr. Nguyen's voice came through crisp and tired. Detective preliminary toxicology on Daniel Hartley confirms cyanide compound in blood and gastric content. Concentration consistent with ingestion within 30 minutes of symptom onset. Morales nodded silently. Understood. There's more, Nguyen continued. We ran trace analysis on hair samples. The follicles show low-level cyanide metabolite deposits. That means prolonged exposure, not a one-time dose. Weeks, maybe months. The room went still. Even the text stopped typing. I felt the words like a weight pressing into my ribs. She's been dosing him. For months. Looks that way, Dr. Nguyen said softly. If you hadn't switched cups yesterday, Mr. Hartley, he'd be dead by now. Morales closed her notebook with a snap. Thank you, doctor. We'll need that report expedited for the DA. Already sent, Nguyen said. Full results. Within 24 hours. The line clicked off. For a long moment, no one spoke. Only the quiet hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen. Morales finally exhaled. All right, she said. We're done here. Seal it up. The forensics team began packing, labeling, photographing every inch before sealing the evidence bags. Klein turned to me. Raymond, you've done everything right. From the video to the labeling, that's what's holding this case together. You might have just saved not one life, but two. I wanted to believe him. But as I looked around my kitchen, my wife's picture still hanging by the pantry, my son's chair tipped over by the wall, all I could think was how much trust can poison before you even taste it. Outside, the fall wind carried the smell of burnt leaves. For the first time, I wondered if justice could ever wash the sweetness out of that house. Detective Morales believed in patterns, the kind that hide in plain sight until someone bothers to line the dots. That afternoon, she started connecting the ones orbiting around Brooke Hartley. I wasn't there when she pulled the first thread, but I heard about it later from ADA Klein. He said Morales drove herself to the old Milwaukee area community college campus where Brooke had taken classes almost 15 years earlier. The security office had long since changed staff, but the records room still kept its paper ghosts. There, buried in a yellowing student file, was the name Kyle Mercer. Brooke's boyfriend back then died in what the papers called a tragic garage accident. Slipped on an oil spill, cracked his head on the concrete. Case closed. Morales tracked down one of Kyle's old friends, DeSausen, a mechanic who'd been at the scene that night. They met at a small diner off Lincoln Avenue. Jason looked older than his years, grease still under his nails, guilt behind his eyes. "Detective," he said, stirring his coffee, "I remember the smell. Not oil, something sweeter, like burnt syrup. The floor was slick as hell. The cops said it was an accident, but the oil wasn't from the car. It looked poured." Morales leaned forward. "You ever hear from Brooke after?" He nodded once. "She texted Kyle the night before he died. Told him not to come over. 'I'm not feeling well. Don't stop by tonight.'" "You sure it was from her? I saw it myself," Jason said. "He showed me the message while we were closing the shop. Next night, he went anyway." Morales closed her notebook. The pattern had begun to hum. From the college, she went to Brooke's old workplace, Halverson Manufacturing, a small tool company on the south side. Brooke had worked in accounting there before marrying Daniel. The current office manager, an older man named Henry, remembered the night their supervisor, Mr. Halverson himself, collapsed at his desk. "Heart attack," Henry said. Or that's what they called it. He was working late alone, drinking coffee from the communal pot. We all took turns brewing by schedule. Guess whose turn it was that night? Brooke Hartley, Morales said flatly. Back then she was Brooke Dawson. Henry corrected. Quiet girl, always smiling. Nobody suspected a thing. The autopsy report from 15 years ago had listed cardiac arrest, undetermined cause. No toxicology ever done. No one had reason to ask. Until now. Back at her desk, Morales pulled the files side by side. Kyle Mercer 2009. Halverson Manufacturing 2012. Daniel Hartley 2325. 3 men. 3 collapse. Aim pattern. Sweet smell. Sudden death. Brooke at the center. Then came the twist Morales hadn't expected. A request came in from the Department of Children and Families, background verification for Brooke's employment history. The clerk reviewing the old paperwork noticed something odd. Brooke's original ID listed her birth year as 1990. A later document, processed 5 years later, under her married name, showed 1990 or 2 years shaved off, just enough to qualify for a youth employment incentive program that doubled her benefits and allowed her to claim a housing grant. The approval signature belonged to Janice Farlow, a mid-level clerk who had since retired. Morales called her. Janice answered in a quavering voice. Oh, that name again. Brooke Dawson. Haven't heard it in years. Ms. Farlow, Morales said, records show you adjusted her birth year manually. Can you tell me why? Janice hesitated. She came to my desk earring. Said she lost her parents young, that the records were mixed up. I felt sorry for her. She was so polite. Did you receive any compensation afterward? Morales asked, voice gentle. Janice didn't answer right away. I got an envelope a few weeks later. No note. Just cash. I thought it was from the department bonus pool. Guess I was stupid. After the call, Morales sat in silence, the threads knitting tighter in her mind. Sweeteners, masking toxins, life insurance money, falsified records, always money, always control. She pulled her phone from her pocket, snapped photos of her whiteboard. Kyle, 2009 oil accident, sweet odor, text don't come. Halverson 2012 heart attack coffee schedule. Brooke. Daniel 2035 cyanide almond odor insurance, Raymond Target new insurance policy will draft. Pattern poison. Payout. Relocation. It was a signature just written in sugar instead of ink. Meanwhile, at the DA's office, Klein was reviewing affidavits for the grand jury submission when his phone buzzed unknown number. The message preview flashed across his screen. You're digging too deep. Janice Farlow's testimony doesn't need to happen. We can make it go away. Cash on the table. Keep the old man off the stand. He's confused anyway. Let him rest. Klein froze. The next message came before he could reply. Meet at 8 p.m. Iron Horse Hotel parking lot. Envelope in the black sedan glove compartment. No one needs to know. He stared at the screen for a full minute, pulse kicking hard in his throat. Then he forwarded the entire thread to Morales. 10 seconds later, her reply buzzed back. Don't engage. We'll trace it. Someone's trying to buy silence and to paint Raymond as senile. Klein looked at the message again, his jaw tight. Someone out there wanted to erase a witness, and they thought calling me forgetful would make me harmless. They didn't know that every word I'd spoken, every photo, every timestamp was already burned into the official record. But they were about to find out how dangerous an old man with a memory could be. By midweek, Milwaukee's grand jury room smelled of stale coffee and printer ink. ADA Patrick Klein stood at the podium, voice even laying out the timeline, the cups, the almond odor, the fake stevia caramel, the insurance drafts. The jurors listened stone-faced. When the clerk read the list of seized evidence, the notebook, the syringes, the phone folder named caramel recipes, someone in the back let out a low whistle. By noon, the foreperson signed the indictment. Brooke Hartley, attempted murder, insurance fraud, obstruction. An arrest team moved fast. Morales herself read the Miranda rights in the hospital corridor outside Daniel's room. Brooke was still wearing her cardigan from the night before, hair tied too neatly for someone under suspicion. She didn't fight, just whispered, "I want my lawyer, Jenna Marks." Inside the interview suite, everything was by the book. 2 cameras, timestamp overlay, a visible clock on the wall. Klein sat beside Morales. Brooke sat across from them, flanked by her new attorney, a sharp woman in a navy suit whose first move was to pour Brooke a glass of water. At first, Brooke trembled so hard the cup rattled. Then the tears came quiet, almost graceful. "I know how this looks," she said between sobs. "But you don't understand where I came from." Morales didn't blink. "Then explain it." "My father drank himself blind," Brooke began. "He'd lock me in the garage when he was angry. One night he passed out with a cigarette, and the whole place caught fire. I was 14. They said I was lucky to live. After that She hesitated, eyes glassy. "I learned to separate. Sometimes I black out. It's called dissociation. I lose time. I don't remember things right." Klein let her finish, then slid a photo across the table, one of the caramel recipes folder from her phone. "These photos," he said softly, "each taken the same evenings your husband's symptoms got worse. Explain that." Brooke stared at the image, cup, spoons, that amber syrup bottle, glowing under kitchen light. "I write," she said finally. "Crime drafts. I use real props, take photos for reference. It's fiction. You're twisting my work into something sick." Morales opened another photo, a page of her handwritten note, ROI after claim, life payout timeline. "Also fiction." Brooke's lawyer leaned forward. "She's an amateur novelist. These are creative exercises. Unless you can prove intent, this is speculative." Klein folded his hands. "We intend to. The state's filing for a Daubert hearing to qualify our toxicology and digital forensics experts before trial. The jury will see real science, not speculation." The camera caught Brooke's jaw tighten, but she said nothing more. When the interview ended, Morales escorted her back to holding. "On the way out, I was waiting in the observation corridor. I'd asked to see her one conversation under supervision. The DA approved partly out of curiosity, partly to see what she might let slip. The door clicked behind me as I entered the small visitation room. Metal table, 2 chairs, a uniformed deputy at the corner, silent witness. Brooke looked smaller, without the performance makeup. Still, she smiled that same polite smile, the one that used to mean coffee's ready. "Ray," she said softly, "I didn't think you'd come." I almost didn't. I sat down, hands folded. But I needed to hear your voice once, without the tears and the lawyers. Her eyes searched mine. "Do you really believe I'd hurt Daniel or you?" I took a breath that felt heavier than air. "I believe what I saw, what I smelled, what the doctors found in his blood. And I believe you're better at pretending than anyone I've ever met." She blinked, the kindness slipping for a heartbeat. "You think you're some kind of hero? You switched the cups, Ray. You did that. You made it messy." I held her gaze. "Messy," her lips pressed into a line. "If you hadn't messed with the cups," she whispered almost to herself, "it would have been clean." The room went so quiet, I could hear the deputy's pen stop scratching. Morales, watching from behind the one-way glass, marked the time in her notes. Near admission, 18:47:19. Brooke realized too late what she'd said. She tried to recover. "I mean clean as in simple, without misunderstandings." I stood slowly. No misunderstandings left, Brooke. Just truth. Her face hardened into something cold and unrecognizable. "You think anyone will believe an old man with tremors and missing screws in his head? You're already forgetful." "I remember enough," I said, and walked out before she could finish. That night, Morales set up the sting. The anonymous text Klein had received, the offer to neutralize Janice Farlow, was traced to a prepaid burner registered under a cousin's name, Evan Grayson Brooks' only surviving relative. At 1:02 p.m., under flickering lot lights at the Iron Horse Hotel, Janice arrived nervous, clutching her purse. Evan waited by a black sedan engine idling. He handed her a thick envelope. "Brooks says this'll help clear things up. Just say you mixed up the records all right." Janice's hands shook as she took it. That's when unmarked cars rolled in from both sides, lights flaring red and blue. Morales stepped out, badge in one hand, voice cutting through the wind. "Evan Grayson, you are under arrest for tampering with a witness and obstruction of justice. Step away from the vehicle." The envelope hit the pavement, bills scattering like dead leaves. Back at District 3, Morales phoned Klein. "Sting successful. We've got the cousin in custody, cash recovered, audio and video clean." Klein exhaled. "Good. Add it to the indictment." Outside his office window, the Milwaukee skyline glowed cold against the river. The net was closing tighter, sharper, and for the first time in months, I slept without waking to the smell of burnt caramel. The courthouse on 9th Street had that clean, sterile smell of paper and polished wood that never quite hid the tension underneath. It was the day of the pre-trial motions, the legal knife fight, before the real war began. Brooks' defense attorney, Jenna Marks, swept into courtroom 4B with a stack of motions so thick it looked like she was carrying the Bible and an axe in the same hand. ADA Patrick Klein was already there, calm, sleeves rolled up, his legal pad filled with meticulous blue ink lines. Morales sat behind him in the first row, notebook on her lap. I sat further back, close enough to hear, but not to speak. My name wasn't on the docket today, but the story being dissected was still mine. Marks rose first. "Your Honor." She began the defense moves to suppress all physical evidence derived from the alleged coffee cups, as the chain of custody was compromised. A civilian, Mr. Hartley, handled and bagged them prior to police collection, contaminating the samples. The hospital staff are not certified evidence technicians. Judge Whitaker, a tall man with reading glasses perpetually low on his nose, leaned back. Mr. Klein stood, Your Honor, the record shows that Mr. Hartley preserved not contaminated the evidence. He bagged the cups by the handle, only gloves visible on video, before immediately turning them over to medical personnel. 2 registered nurses co-signed the initial log, and Detective Morales assumed custody under a signed chain. The integrity remains intact. Marks countered quickly. The chain began with a civilian, not law enforcement. Precedent is clear. Klein cut in. Precedent also states that reasonable steps to preserve transient evidence in exigent circumstances are valid. Without Hartley's quick action, we'd have no samples at all. Judge Whitaker scribbled a note, then looked up. Motion to suppress is denied. Chain of custody remains unbroken. Proceed. Marks barely flinched before pulling out another motion. Next, Your Honor. A Frank's hearing. We assert that Detective Morales' affidavit contained factual misstatements, specifically that Mrs. Hartley attempted to destroy evidence. The defense contends she was merely clearing a spill in a medical emergency, not concealing a crime. We request that the search warrant and all evidence derived therefrom be voided. Klein exhaled as though he'd expected this. The affidavit is supported by 911 audio, Mr. Hartley's recorded video, and corroboration from Dr. Nguyen, who confirmed cyanide odor at the scene. Probable cause was overwhelming and properly vetted by Judge Whitaker himself. That last line earned a small smile from the bench. You're correct, Counselor. I saw that warrant before I signed it. There was nothing misleading in it. The Frank's motion is denied. Marks's jaw tightened. She wasn't used to losing. Very well. The defense also moves to sever the witness tampering count. The cousin Evan Grayson acted independently and without Mrs. Hartley's knowledge. Klein tapped his pen once. The state opposes severance. The offer to bribe Janice Farlow directly references Brooks' instructions. The crimes are intertwined, one narrative of obstruction. The jury should hear it together. After a pause, the judge agreed. Motion to sever denied. That made it a clean sweep. 3 denials in under 40 minutes. Klein's case looked like steel. Still, Marks didn't fold. She stood straighter, adjusted her blazer, and walked toward the defense table, like she'd just been waiting for the real show to begin. Your Honor, she said, voice soft but cutting, if the state insists on painting my client as a calculating poisoner, the defense will demonstrate a more plausible truth, that Mr. Hartley, the so-called hero witness, had both motive and opportunity to frame her. The words hit the room like a dropped wrench. She turned toward me, then her expression calm but surgical. We intend to show that Mr. Hartley harbored resentment over finances, specifically his son's decision to sell the family home to relieve debt. We'll present photographic evidence of an argument between father and son 2 weeks before the alleged poisoning, in which Mr. Hartley can be seen shouting, finger raised, while Daniel attempts to walk away. She slid an enlarged print onto the evidence table. It was me standing on the porch, caught mid-gesture, mouth open in what looked like rage. Daniel's face was blurred with motion, but the distance between us was enough to tell its own story. Marks continued. The state wants to show a pattern of manipulation by my client. We will show a pattern of obsession by the father, an aging man, terrified of losing his son and his home. A man who recorded his own kitchen, handled his own evidence, and created the illusion of poisoning to destroy a woman he disliked. Klein shot up. Objection, speculative and inflammatory. There's zero evidence Mr. Hartley fabricated anything. Not yet, Marks said smoothly, but discoveries on Geesties. We've subpoenaed his phone and home security logs. We'll show that he edited the video before turning it in. Whitaker raised a hand. Counsel, you can argue that at trial. This is pre-trial procedure, not theater. Still, the words hung heavy in the room. Marks had done what she came to do. Introduce doubt, twist perception. When court adjourned, Reporters swarmed outside the marble steps, microphones like bayonets. Someone shouted, "Mr. Hartley, did you fabricate the video?" Morales stepped between us and the crowd, one hand on my shoulder. "Keep walking, Ray. Don't feed them." In the hallway, Klein caught up, voice low. "She's playing dirty, but it's noise. The judge trusts the evidence chain, and we've got science on our side." "What if she makes Daniel doubt me?" I asked. "That photo. It looks bad." Klein looked me dead in the eye. "Then we make the truth louder. Tomorrow I'm calling Dr. Nguyen, the forensic digital analyst, the property clerk, and Morales herself. We'll walk the court through every link in the chain until even the jury can taste the cyanide in the air." And he did. The next morning, Dr. Lila Nguyen took the stand, first calm, precise, speaking in the rhythm of a scientist who knows her math. "Cyanide acts by binding to cytochrome oxidase," she explained. "It prevents oxygen from reaching tissues." We measured elevated thiocyanate in Mr. Hartley's son's blood, confirming on-being exposure. Our spectrometer uses parts per billion sensitivity. Then came the digital forensic expert. He described the EXIF metadata and SHA-256 hash validation that proved Brooks' phone photos hadn't been altered. Every timestamp aligns to the minute. Daniel's symptoms recurred, he told the court. The property clerk testified next, confirming that each evidence seal remained unbroken since intake. "The duct tape signature crosses are intact. Your Honor, we photographed the seams before storage." Finally, Morales walked the jury through the warrant line by line. The probable cause was strong, the execution clean. No step taken without judicial authorization. By the time Klein rested, the courtroom felt airtight. Judge Whitaker leaned forward, his voice final. "The motions are denied in full. Probable cause is clear. The chain of evidence stands." Mark smiled faintly. "Then the defense will shift its strategy, Your Honor. We will show that this case is not about toxicology or metadata. It's about jealousy, money, and an aging father who couldn't stand losing control." And with that, she turned toward the gallery, toward me, and smiled just enough for the cameras to catch it. The next headline wrote itself before we even left the courthouse. "Defense claims father framed daughter-in-law in poison case." For the first time, the fight wasn't about cyanide anymore. It was about blood, mind, and my sons being dragged into the open. The courtroom was colder than any factory floor I'd ever worked on. Marble microphones and a silence thick enough to chew. It wasn't TV drama. No shouting, no gasps. Just tension wound so tight you could hear it creak. When trial opened, ADA Patrick Klein stood, jacket buttoned, eyes calm. The people called Dr. Lila Nguyen. She took the stand in her white coat, silver badge of Frodtert Hospital, glinting under the lights. Her voice was soft, but carried weight. "Cyanide binds to hemoglobin. It replaces oxygen, suffocates from the inside." The victim, Daniel Hartley, showed elevated thiocyanate levels, consistent with repeated exposure. Klein walked her through it, like a teacher. "Doctor, did you find cyanide in the coffee cups submitted as evidence?" "Yes. Trace amounts on the rim and residual liquid. All 3 cups tested, but only one, Daniel's, contained lethal concentration. And the source, the same compound found in the suspect's household jar, labeled stevia caramel." She held up a photo, the amber jar, gloved hand lifting it, forensic ruler beside. "It's not food grade. It's chemical grade potassium cyanide dissolved in syrup." The jurors shifted in their seats. One woman pressed her lips together like she could taste the word cyanide. Then came the next witness, a young man from the digital forensics unit. He was nervous until he started talking about data. Then his voice steadied, confident. "We extracted 37 photographs from the defendant's phone stored under a folder titled Caramel Recipe. Metadata shows timestamps matching evenings when Daniel Hartley experienced cardiac distress. Klein leaned in. Were any of the images altered? No, sir. We verified file integrity through SHA 25060 hashing. All original. He clicked the remote, and the courtroom screen flickered. Images projected large, a spoon hovering over a steaming cup, a bottle of amber liquid mid-pour. Then another, a woman's hand holding the cup steady. Nude nail polish. Short oval nails. Klein turned toward the jury. Dr. Nguyen, during your hospital examination, what color nail polish was? Mrs. Hartley wearing neutral nude. Nguyen answered. Same as in the photo. No one spoke for a long 10 seconds. Next came the financial analyst, gray suit, wire-rimmed glasses, a spreadsheet mined in human mode. Mrs. Hartley withdrew small sums, $200 to $500 every Friday for the past 8 months. Total withdrawals exceed $12,000 unaccounted for in household expenses. Ceases. Klein nodded. Any life insurance connections? Yes. A recently issued life policy for Raymond Hartley, purchased 2 months ago. Primary beneficiary, Brooke Hartley. Premium prepaid. And you reviewed a will draft found in the defendant's home. The analyst adjusted his glasses. Yes. It declared Raymond Hartley mentally incapacitated, transferring executor rights and estate ownership to Brooke Hartley. It also removed Daniel Hartley as co-beneficiary. The jurors didn't look at Brooke. They looked at me. Then came Mrs. O'Connor. She walked carefully to the witness stand, tiny and frail, but fierce-eyed under her Sunday hat. Klein approached gently. Mrs. O'Connor, do you recall the dessert Mrs. Hartley brought you? Her voice trembled but didn't break. She called it caramel pudding. Said it was sugar-free. I only had a few bites before my heart went wild. Everything spun. I woke up on the floor. Klein handed her a photo of the silver spoon sealed in evidence. Is this the spoon you mentioned? Yes. I never washed it. Something told me not to. Forensic analysis showed trace cyanide residue on that spoon, Klein told the court. Same compound as in the jar, from Mrs. Hartley's kitchen. The jurors looked shaken. So was I. And then my name was called. The people call Raymond Hartley. Walking to the stand felt like walking into my own funeral. I placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and Sadi sat down. Klein stood a few feet away. Mr. Hartley, could you tell the jury what happened the morning of November 1st? I told it all. The smell, the foam, the clock ticking, the cup switch, my son collapsing, Brooke's hand reaching for the tray. How I'd said don't touch a damn thing. How I'd sealed the cups, filmed the scene, called 911. Why did you do that? Klein asked. Because I've spent 40 years fixing things that break, I said. When something goes wrong, you save what's left, so you can find out why. He nodded. Did you have any conflict with your son or daughter-in-law? I took a deep breath. Yes. We argued about selling the house. Daniel wanted to pay off debt. I wanted to keep it. We shouted. It happens. Love ain't neat, but it's steady. I never stopped being his father. Klein let the silence hang long enough for the jurors to see I wasn't ashamed of that truth. Then he turned to the screen. Mr. Hartley, I'd like you to listen to a clip from the defendant's interrogation. This is timestamped, November 3rd, 1847 hours. The lights dimmed slightly as the video began to play. Brooke's face filled the screen, hair pulled back, voice trembling, but cold. You think you're some kind of hero? You switched the cups. Ray, you did that. You made it messy. My image didn't move on the other side of the glass, but my voice was clear. Messy. And then her voice again, quieter, almost tender. If you hadn't messed with the cups, it would have been clean. The words echoed in the courtroom, like a dropped coin rolling to a stop. No one breathed. Even the stenographer paused. On the defense table, Brooke's hand twitched toward her water glass. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper something, but she didn't answer. Klein let the silence stretch, then said softly, "Clean." Her word, not mine. He turned back to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, that's intense speaking, not conviction." That's the voice of someone who thought her plan was flawless, until an old man's instinct got in the way. He clicked the screen off. The room stayed dark for a heartbeat longer than usual, as if the court itself wanted the word clean to sink in. When the lights came back, I could feel every juror watching me, not with pity this time, but with understanding. For the first time since it started, I believed they saw her for what she was. If the prosecution's case was built on science, the defense built theirs on sympathy. The next morning, the courtroom looked more like a therapy session than a trial. Jenna Marks rose with the poise of someone who'd spent her whole life selling reasonable doubt. The defense calls Dr. Calvin Moritz, clinical psychologist. Moritz was middle-aged, tweed jacket hands, clasped like he was holding something fragile. He explained dissociation and trauma, the way a pastor might talk about forgiveness. When a person has lived through chronic fear or childhood neglect, he said they may create rituals, small repetitive acts, to regain control. These can look obsessive: writing lists, taking photos, measuring, recording. They're not malicious, they're survival mechanisms. Mark smiled faintly. Dr. Could Brooks' photographs and notations, the so-called meal and dose log, be an example of that kind of ritual? It's entirely possible, Moritz replied. A way to manage anxiety, not a record of harm. On-cross Klein was polite but surgical. "Doctor, you said you evaluated Mrs. Hartley personally." "Yes. 2 sessions, about an hour each. 2 hours total." Klein didn't raise his voice, just let the number hang. "Do you have long-term records of treatment, therapy notes, or a psychiatric diagnosis predating her arrest?" "No." "Did Mrs. Hartley ever mention that her rituals involved pre-dilution ratios, timestamps, matching hospital admissions, or financial terms like ROI after claim?" Moritz blinked. "No, I wasn't aware of those details." "So if someone told you this ritual coincided with multiple hospitalizations, a death ruled an accident, and repeated insurance payouts, would you still call it harmless?" "I'd need to review the data." Klein stepped back. "Exactly. Thank you, doctor." When he sat down, half the jurors were already scribbling notes. Next came a line of character witnesses: Brooks' yoga instructor, her church acquaintance, a former co-worker. Every one of them said the same thing: sweet woman, always baking, soft voice. None of them had ever fainted, fallen ill, or eaten anything caramel she made. The jury listened politely, but their eyes glazed. It was theater, and they knew it. Finally, Mark stood tall. "The defense calls Brooke Hartley." The courtroom quieted as she walked to the stand, in a pale blouse, hair loose this time. She looked softer, smaller. A single tear shimmered as she swore the oath. Marks began gently. "Brooke, could you tell the jury about your childhood?" Her voice trembled like a practiced violin note. "My father was an alcoholic. One night he passed out with a cigarette, and the house caught fire. I was 14. I pulled him out, but he died anyway. Sometimes when I smell smoke or chemicals, it takes me back. I don't mean to lose time, but I do. I just wanted a quiet home, a family, to be loved." She looked toward the jury, eyes shining. "I'm not a monster. I'm someone who gets scared." Marks nodded, satisfied, and stepped aside. Klein approached slowly, one hand in his pocket. "Mrs. Hartley," he said, voice low, "let's talk about control." She blinked. "Control? You brewed the coffee, correct?" "Yes." "You prepared the syrup yourself?" "Yes." He lifted a photo. "This is your syrup pump seized from your kitchen. Do you recognize it?" "Yes." You measured those pumps, didn't you? 1 pump per cup. Consistent ratios. I like things neat. Neat, Klein echoed. Is that why you kept insulin syringes at home? She stiffened. They are for vitamins. I read about intramuscular supplements on these. He didn't look away. You're not diabetic. No. Klein placed another document on the screen. Her insurance policy. You took out a life insurance policy on your father-in-law 2 months before the incident. Beneficiary you. You also drafted a will stating he was incapacitated. Was that neat too? Her lawyer started to object, but the judge waved her down. Overruled. Answer the question. Brooks' voice cracked. I didn't mean harm. I was trying to protect the family finances. He was spending money. And the notation, ROI after claim in your files, Klein pressed. That's not therapy language, Mrs. Hartley. That's profit. She shook her head violently. I write fiction. I told you that. Then let's talk fiction, Klein said. Did you also write the text, "Don't come tonight," to Kyle Mercer, the boyfriend who died in a garage accident the next day? Brooke froze. He took one step closer. Or the night shift coffee rotation at Halverson Manufacturing the night your supervisor collapsed from what you called a heart attack. You were on duty then, weren't you? I don't remember, she whispered. Klein tilted his head. You don't remember, or you dissociated. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. The jury watched silent. Even her lawyer's pen had stopped moving. Klein let the pause stretch until it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then he spoke softly, almost kindly. Mrs. Hartley, earlier you told Mr. Hartley, in a recorded conversation, that if he hadn't messed with the cups, it would have been clean. Do you remember saying that? Her eyes darted toward Mark's. I was upset. I didn't mean... Klein nodded toward the AV tech. Play the recording. The audio filled the room. Not the choppy half-heard clip from before. This was the full version, clear as daylight. Brooke, you think you're some kind of hero? You switched the cups, Ray. You did that. You made it messy. Raymond off. Messy, Brooke. Colder. Deliberate. Now, if you hadn't messed with the cups, it would have been clean. The voice was steady, not trembling, not confused, not dissociated. Clean. The playback stopped. The silence afterward was deafening. Brooke's eyes darted around the room, desperate for a lifeline. None came. Klein turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, trauma doesn't calculate dilution ratios, anxiety doesn't take out insurance policies, and grief doesn't call murder clean. He stepped back, hands clasped behind him. The state rests. Brooke sat motionless. On the stand, the mask slipping just enough, for the first time beneath the tears, and trembling, something colder flickered like the reflection of a flame that never went out. By the final morning, the courtroom felt airless, like everyone had already breathed all the oxygen out of it over the past 2 weeks. The walls carried the weight of every word said and every silence that followed. It was time for the closing arguments. ADA Patrick Klein stood first. His suit looked the same as always, but his voice was different, lower, deliberate, carrying the tired conviction of someone who believed in the system, even when it hurt. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, this case is not about a moment of madness. It's about a series of decisions, each one calculated, deliberate, profitable. He walked toward the jury box, hands loose at his sides. You've heard from Dr. Nguyen about the cyanide in the coffee, the patterns of exposure. You've seen the photos from the defendant's phone each time, stamped each matching the hours when Daniel Hartley fell sick. You've heard from Mrs. O'Connor about her caramel pudding and the spoon that nearly killed her. And you've listened to the defendant herself, describing what she called clean. He paused there just long enough for the word to echo in every juror's head. Clean. That's not panic. That's not trauma. That's intent. He stepped closer to the jury rail, lowering his voice. This wasn't poison mixed in desperation. It was bookkeeping. A life policy here, a cash withdrawal there. A will rewritten, a signature forged. A pattern stretching back years. Her boss, her boyfriend, now her husband. He pointed to the evidence display board behind him, where 3 photographs were pinned side by side. Kyle Mercer, 2009. Mr. Halverson, 2012. Daniel Hartley, 2025. 3 faces. 3 different lives. 1 familiar shadow behind them. These men can't testify, Klein said quietly. They can't tell you what they tasted in those final seconds, or what they trusted before they stopped breathing. But you can give them something they never got: recognition. Justice. He turned, gesturing toward me in the gallery. And you can give this man who saved the evidence, who switched the cups, who refused to let silence bury the truth, the peace of knowing his son's life still meant something. He let that settle before closing. The law doesn't ask you to feel hate or pity. It asks you to see the pattern, to recognize choice where others see chaos, to call evil by its right name, even when it wears a smile and says, "It's for your health." He took a breath, eyes meeting each juror. Deliver the verdict that speaks for all the voices she silenced. Find her guilty. When he sat down, the only sound was the shuffling of paper and the ticking of the courtroom clock. Then it was Jenna Marks's turn. She stood gracefully, smoothing her jacket, her voice soft as silk. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "you just heard a story, a terrifying one. But that's what it is, a story. A chain of coincidences woven into a villain narrative, because the prosecution needed someone to blame." She turned, gesturing toward Brooke, who sat still, eyes downcast, hands folded like a penitent saint. "My client is not a monster. She is a survivor. A woman shaped by trauma, fighting for normalcy. Her so-called pattern is the story of a woman who tried to build control out of chaos, and now she's being punished for it." Marks paced gently, voice ever rising. "And what of the father? Mr. Hartley is elderly, forgetful, and by his own admission, angry about losing his home. He handled the cups, sealed the evidence, made himself the star witness. Do you really believe beyond a reasonable doubt that his fear didn't twist what he saw, that grief didn't color his judgment?" She stopped in front of the jury box. "The state asks you to convict on emotion, on tragedy. I ask you to remember the law. Reasonable doubt isn't about possibility. It's about certainty. And there's no certainty here, only heartbreak." She looked down at her notes, then back up. "If you can't say for sure what happened in that kitchen, you must vote not guilty." When she sat down, even I couldn't deny she'd done her job well. If I hadn't lived it myself, I might have hesitated too. Judge Whitaker leaned forward. His jury instructions were crisp, methodical, stripped of drama. "You will consider whether the state has proven intent beyond a reasonable doubt. You must weigh circumstantial evidence as you would direct testimony. You will not let sympathy for either side sway your verdict." He reminded them of the 3 charges: attempted murder, Daniel Hartley murder, in the second-degree pattern X, under Rule 404B, and witness tampering. Then the bailiff led the jury out. The hours that followed stretched like days. The courthouse emptied, refilled, emptied again. I sat outside the courtroom doors, the same place where I had waited for Daniel's surgery weeks ago. Same numb patience, same quiet prayer. When the jury finally filed back in, their faces gave nothing away. The 4-person, a gray-haired woman in a blue cardigan, stood and handed the verdict sheet to the clerk. The judge read aloud. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, guilty. On the charge of murder in the second degree, guilty. On the charge of witness tampering, guilty." Brooke didn't cry. She didn't even blink. Her lawyer reached for her hand, but Brooke pulled away, eyes fixed on the far wall. The sentencing came fast. Life imprisonment, without parole for the murder count. Attempted murder to run concurrent. Tampering stayed consecutive. As the bailiff led her out, Brooke turned her head once, just a fraction, and met my eyes. No tears, no anger. Just the cold recognition that the game was over. When it was all done, the reporters swarmed again. Klein brushed past them without a word. Morales gave me a small nod, half victory, half exhaustion. Outside the courthouse, the November wind cut through my coat. Daniel stood near the steps, thinner, paler, but alive. He looked at me for a long time before speaking. "Dad," he said softly, "did you ever stop loving me?" When I chose her, the words hit harder than any verdict. My throat tightened. I tried to answer, but nothing came out. So I just placed my hand on his shoulder and held it there, the silence between us, saying everything and nothing at once. Some truths need time before they can be spoken. The answer would come later. Winter had already rolled across Milwaukee by the time the courthouse emptied of reporters, and the verdicts became yesterday's news. Snow came soft that week, quieting everything, the streets, the talk, even the ache in my bones. Daniel moved back into rehab, his body weak, but his eyes clearer than they'd been in years. I visited him every morning with black coffee from the diner across the street. No sugar, no syrup, just coffee that told the truth. The first time we really talked wasn't in some dramatic reconciliation. It was in the therapy courtyard, sitting on a bench that squeaked like an old dock board. He said, "Dad, I don't remember the worst of it. Just flashes, the smell, the panic." Then I remember thinking, she wouldn't do that. I nodded. That's how it works, son. Gaslighting ain't loud, it's patient. It makes you second-guess the ground under your feet. He looked down, his hands trembling slightly. "She said you wanted me to sell the house to get rid of me." That house, I smiled bitterly. That place was already trying to bury us both. I wasn't mad because you wanted to sell it. I was mad because I couldn't protect you in it. He went quiet for a while. Then, barely above a whisper, "I thought I was weak." I shook my head. "No. You were trying to keep peace. That's not weakness. But sometimes peace costs more than it's worth." When he smiled, a small, fragile thing, it felt like spring cracked through winter for the first time. A month later, I sold the house, signed the papers without looking back. Too many ghosts in those walls, too many mornings that smelled like lies. I split the money 3 ways. One part went to Daniel's medical fund, one part to a scholarship at the trade school, so older workers could learn new skills instead of being thrown away like worn tools. And the third, my favorite, became the back porch light fund. It started as a joke between me and Daisy's doctorate. Wait, how every bad story in Milwaukee seemed to begin or end on someone's back porch. So we turned that into a place where stories could change direction. The first workshop met on a gray Saturday morning in the community hall. The folding chairs were filled with gray hair, calloused hands, and faces that had seen too much. Dr. Nguyen opened with a talk about common poisons in everyday homes. Detective Morales followed, breaking down how to photograph evidence properly, when to call 911, how to describe what you smell without sounding crazy. Ada Klein came last, all no-nonsense, explaining how chain of custody worked, why every note, every timestamp mattered. When it was my turn, I didn't use a microphone. I just spoke like I would to the guys at the shipyard years ago, plain, slow, and honest. Most of us were raised to keep quiet, I told them. We thought love meant giving people the benefit of the doubt. We thought suspicion made us ungrateful. I looked around at the rows of faces, every one of them carrying some scar I'd never see. But here's what I learned. Doubt can save your life. Doubt's not betrayal, it's self-defense. A woman in the back wiped her eyes. A man next to her nodded. I lifted my coffee cup, Black steady steam rising. Revenge isn't the flames, I said. It's the shut door taking away the tools they use to hurt you. That's how you win. Not by hating. By living in the open where nothing poisonous hides. The room went quiet for a moment, and then they applauded, not loud but long. After the workshop, Mrs. O'Connor hobbled up with her cane and a smile that reached her eyes. She handed me a photo in a simple wooden frame. It was Daniel and me on the back porch of the old house. I didn't even remember the moment, me sitting in the chair, him leaning over, one arm around my shoulder, the other holding a mug. The light hit us just right, warm, honest. He left this at the clinic bulletin board, she said. Said you might want it. I looked at that photo for a long time after she left. I realized what I'd never said out loud, not in court, not in therapy, not even in prayer. That night, I drove across town to Daniel's new place. He was in the kitchen folding laundry, slow and careful. When he looked up, I held out the picture. Mrs. O'Connor found this, I said. He smiled, then hesitated, the same question from the courthouse still hanging between us. Dad, when I chose her, did you ever stop loving me? I set the photo down, stepped closer and answered this time. No, son. I never stopped. I just waited where you could still find me. His eyes went wet, but he laughed through it. We both did. I poured 2 mugs of coffee. Black. No sugar. No syrup. We sat at his small kitchen table talking about everything and nothing. The shipyard days, Mom's old record player, what we'd cook for Thanksgiving. For once, the silence wasn't heavy. It was home. Weeks later, the back porch light center opened its first permanent building, a converted auto shop with a sign, hand-painted by volunteers. On opening day, I stood by the door greeting folks as they came in. A retired teacher brought cookies, a widow brought her granddaughter, and one old man, with a veteran's cap, stopped gripping the doorframe. Name's Frank Delaney, he said. 70 years old. Used to be MPD. Good to meet you, Frank, I said. You here for the class? He shook his head, eyes sharp but kind. Heard you were putting together folks who don't want to be victims anymore. Figured you might need someone who still knows a few tricks. I smiled. You offering to help? He nodded once. You could say that. There's something going on down in Bayview. An old neighbor thinks her meds are being swapped. I glanced past him, to the room full of seniors taking notes under the fluorescent lights. Then let's start with coffee, Frank. Black or with sugar? He grinned. Black, always black. As we walked inside, the bell above the door jingled softly, and the words painted across the wall came into view. Keep the porch light on. Someone might need to find their way home. The story wasn't over. But this time the ones over 50 weren't the victims. They were the first line. You know, people keep asking if I ever got my revenge. But revenge isn't fire. It's not screaming or blood or some grand finale in a courtroom. It's quieter than that. Revenge is waking up every morning and realizing she can't hurt us anymore. It's the sound of my son's laughter coming back, one morning at a time. It's black coffee, no sugar, no lies, cooling on the porch while the world keeps turning. If you're still here, if you've watched this far, tell me in the comments what you would have done. Because me, I just closed the door and made sure the light on that porch stays on, for anyone still finding their way home.